What's with your boy for another reaction? In today's video, we have why Beyond Scared Straight fell off by Buzzkill. Yeah, what the hell happened to that show? That shit was funny as hell, bro. Hopefully he pull up some of the funny iconic clips of Beyond Scared Straight. It's one on the top of my tongue that was funny as fuck, but I can't think of it right now.
A 15-year-old kid stands in a fluorescent lit prison corridor, trying very hard to look tough, while a grown man named Crusher screams inches.
But no cap though, this what these kids needed. They can be tough and stealing cars and getting into shit while they're young. You know what I'm saying? They can be tough.
From his
niggas in jail, they'll take your ass.
Face about what happens when you don't respect authority, society, or apparently
I didn't want her to see me here. She's following my footsteps. That's the hardest part I have to deal with.
mashed potatoes on Thursdays. Somewhere in the background, a producer is nodding like this is a breakthrough moment in juvenile rehabilitation, while the camera zooms in just
I can't tell if you an AI voice or you real.
enough to capture the exact second.
Do you understand me? Do you understand me?
This teenager mentally checks out and starts planning what he's going to tweet about this later. Welcome to Beyond Scared Straight, the show that asked one very simple question. What if therapy, mentorship, and evidence-based intervention were replaced with aggressive yelling and mildly theatrical intimidation, but filmed in HD? When it first aired, this wasn't just television.
Yeah, this clip was funny as fuck. That nigga was scared as hell.
It was presented as a public service, a gritty, no-nonsense wake-up call for troubled youth. The pitch was almost poetic in its simplicity. Take at-risk teens, throw them into a prison for a day, let hardened inmates verbally dismantle their entire personality, and boom, crime solved. Society fixed, roll credits. And honestly, on paper, it sounds convincing. Who wouldn't be scared straight after being screamed at by a man doing push-ups and flip-flops while describing prison food like it's a war crime?
When you're in here, you do what you're told. It's not up to you where you're at.
But here's the problem. Actually, there are many problems. Because while the show presented itself as this raw, transformative experience that would change lives forever, what it really created was something else entirely. A strange mix of reality TV spectacle, moral panic, and what can only be described as trauma with a soundtrack. And the deeper you look, the more the whole thing starts to feel less like intervention and more like performance. So how did we get here? To understand how Beyond Scared Straight became one of the most bizarrely confident social experiments ever broadcast on cable television.
I'm 14 years old. I get in trouble for fighting in school, getting suspended. I'm dangerous.
We need to go back to a time
Yeah, I'm dangerous, son.
when America genuinely believed yelling could fix crime. The concept itself wasn't new. In 1978, the documentary Scared Straight won an Oscar and convinced an entire generation that the best way to reform teenagers was simple. Put them in a room with very angry inmates and let volume do the rest. It was raw, it was intense, and most importantly, it felt effective. And in television, feeling effective is often more important than actually being effective.
Yeah, nobody's gonna make me do thing. I do what the I wanna do.
Fast forward a few decades and reality TV is exploding. Audiences want real stories and networks realize something very convenient. If you package social issues with dramatic confrontation, you don't just get ratings, you get moral justification for those ratings. Enter Beyond Scared Straight in 2011, premiering on A&E like it had just solved juvenile delinquency.
Where are you, sir? Oh, yeah.
The debut pulled in 3.7 million viewers, instantly becoming a hit. And just like that, yelling at teenagers became primetime entertainment. But what really made it work wasn't the idea, it was the framing. This wasn't just a show, it was an intervention. Every episode was edited like a turning point. Every confrontation felt life-changing.
I don't wanna do anything else. Hey, you mean?
One and then have a seat.
And every breakdown looked like progress. And audiences bought it because it tapped into something deeper, a frustration with youth behavior, a desire for simple solutions, and the fantasy that one intense experience could completely reroute someone's life. No long-term therapy, no messy systems, just one loud day in prison, and suddenly everything clicks. Even the creators leaned into this, claiming participants experienced life-changing transformations. And to be fair, on camera, it looked that way. But here's the thing about reality TV. It doesn't just show reality, it shapes it. It cuts, it scores, and it builds a story that feels like an ending. And for a while, Beyond Scared Straight looked like a success. High ratings, cultural
Oh
buzz.
my god, look at that hair, bro. The taco Kevin Durant hair. I hate that. That's probably my pet peeve. I ain't gonna lie.
Parodies everywhere. It wasn't just a show anymore, it was a phenomenon. A loud, aggressive phenomenon built on one very bold promise, that fear could fix everything. For a while, people believed it, but beneath all that confidence, something wasn't adding
Nah, I can.
up. At first, the cracks were subtle,
Come in and get him. Get him. Come in here and get him.
Might want to reconsider your approach.
easy to
Telling a little ass kid come up in there and get him.
ignore if you were too
Yeah, that boy probably a predator.
busy watching a teenager get verbally demolished by a man named Rico who hadn't seen sunlight since flip phones were still cool. Because on the surface, everything still
Damn, you funny as hell. This an AI voice. You funny as fuck.
looked like it was working. The teens cried, the music swelled, the narrator spoke in that calm, authoritative tone that makes anything sound legitimate. And by the end
Oh
of the
yeah. Nigga said put the Kool-Aid on your lips. Yeah.
episode, someone
That
always
was a funny ass. Yeah, this was a funny one too.
said the magic words, "I'm done with that life." Cue the inspirational fade out. But outside the neatly edited world of television,
What set you from?
Playboy Gangsta Crib.
You want to talk to him?
Yeah.
Take the cuffs off.
experts were watching the exact same footage and having a very different reaction. And instead of being impressed, they were alarmed.
Dude.
Almost immediately after the show premiered, organizations like juvenile justice councils and even officials from the U.S. Department of Justice started raising concerns. Not mild concerns, not polite suggestions, but full-on, this might actually be harmful levels of concern. Studies had already been done on Scared Straight style programs, and the results weren't just underwhelming, they were borderline ironic. Instead of reducing crime, these interventions often increase the likelihood of reoffending, which is a pretty awkward outcome for a show whose
For real? That made them niggas get worse and won't go to jail?
entire premise is this will stop you from committing crimes. So now you
That shit done. Hold on. What that's? Let me read that.
awkward outcome for a show whose entire
Is that I don't understand it though. Why do some niggas go to jail, get out of jail, and go right back in? I don't get that. Like, what's the psychology behind it? I don't get that.
premise is this will stop
Like, why you
you
won't go back in there? Like,
from committing crimes. So now you have this bizarre situation where millions of viewers are watching what feels like a success story, while experts are essentially standing in the corner holding a stack of research papers screaming,
And back up. 'Cause I'm gonna be more in your face. I don't give a crap. I don't care.
this is the opposite of what you think it is. And it didn't stop there. Legal and ethical concerns started piling up. Critics pointed out that minors were being exposed to aggressive, sometimes degrading confrontations with adult inmates, which in some cases may have violated guidelines meant to protect young people. In fact, certain states like Maryland and California temporarily shut down similar programs after filming took place because authorities were suddenly forced to ask a very uncomfortable question. Wait, are we actually allowed to do this? And if your intervention program raises legal concerns mid-season,
Now you tell your mom when you leave here. Mom, I promise you.
that's usually not a great sign. But the real turning point wasn't just the research or the policy backlash. It was the growing realization that what people were watching might not be rehabilitation at all, but performance. Because the more episodes aired, the more the formula became obvious. The same structure, the same escalation, the same perfectly timed emotional breakdowns. It started to feel less like an unpredictable intervention and more like a scripted roller coaster. Every drop had already been planned in the editing room. And audiences started noticing. Clips from the show began circulating online, not as inspiring success stories, but as unintentional comedy. Lines like, "I didn't say you was cute," or exaggerated inmate threats became memes, stripped of their original context and repurposed as punchlines. The show that once positioned itself as a serious social experiment was slowly transforming into internet entertainment, which is a very polite way of saying people were laughing at it. Even Saturday Night Live got involved, parodying the show's over-the-top intensity and exposing just how absurd the whole premise looked when you removed the dramatic music and replaced it with literally anything else. And this is where things get really uncomfortable, because while audiences were turning it into meme material, the real-world consequences weren't nearly as funny. There were reports of aggressive behavior, verbal abuse, and situations that critics described as psychologically harmful. In one case, a lawsuit was filed over alleged mistreatment in a similar program, involving physical and verbal abuse that went far beyond tough love. So now the show is stuck in this strange identity crisis. On one hand, it's still trying to present itself as a serious intervention program.
From 60s, ain't you? Put your hands to your side. Look at me in my eyes when I'm talking to you.
On the other hand, it's becoming a viral spectacle where the most memorable moments are the ones that feel the least real. And the ratings, which once exploded out of the gate, started to decline over time. Not dramatically at first, but enough to signal that the novelty was wearing off. Because once you've seen a teenager get yelled at for 45 minutes straight, the second time doesn't hit quite the same. And by the third or fourth time, you start to notice that nothing fundamentally changes. It's just louder, more dramatic, more exaggerated. Like the show is trying to convince you that intensity equals effectiveness. But here's the peak of the collapse, the moment where everything kind of comes together. After years of criticism, declining trust, and growing awareness that the entire premise might be flawed, A&E announced that the 9th season would be the last. The show ended in 2015 after 83 episodes, wrapping up what was once one of the network's biggest hits.
I don't know white cops.
And the final message? The creators maintained that the program had helped many teens, that lives were changed, that the mission was accomplished, which is fascinating. Because by that point, the overwhelming consensus from experts, researchers, and critics was the exact opposite. So you're left with this strange contradiction.
Boy, that white boy don't think jail cool no more.
Show that looked like it was saving lives, while evidence suggested it might be doing harm.
You know where you at?
Boy, that's Chunks. Chunks. That's the nigga, the UK YouTuber Chunks. Is his name right?
Where you at?
A program that thrived on fear but couldn't survive scrutiny, and a cultural moment that started as a solution and ended as a question. Not did it work, but why did we believe it worked in the first place? Here's the uncomfortable truth about Beyond Scared Straight. It didn't just age poorly, it was flawed from the start, because the entire premise rests on one very fragile assumption, that fear leads to long-term change, that if you push someone hard enough, scare them enough, they'll suddenly make better decisions. It sounds convincing, but it ignores something pretty fundamental about how people actually work. Fear doesn't create stability, it creates reaction. And for years, experts had been pointing this out. Studies on Scared Straight style programs didn't just show weak results.
You could fall off a bridge.
You could have an aneurysm on the toilet. You never know.
They showed the opposite of what you'd expect. In many cases, participants were actually more likely to reoffend, which is a pretty awkward outcome for a program built entirely around preventing crime. Once you understand that, the whole show starts to feel less like an intervention and more like a misunderstanding of psychology. Because what the show presents as tough love...
Damn, you thinking too much, Five. I ain't gonna lie, that's why I'm barely saying anything. This nigga just put an AI prompt in and this bitch just talking.
is mostly intimidation without support. There's no consistent follow-up system built into the format, no long-term mentorship that we actually see, no structured plan beyond the episode itself. Just one intense, chaotic experience designed to trigger an emotional reaction, and then it ends. And hope is not a strategy. The deeper issue is that the show wasn't really designed to solve a problem. It was designed to look like it was solving one. It prioritizes moments over outcomes, reactions over results. It needs the breakdown, the emotional turning point, the moment where everything seems to click. Because that's what makes the episode feel complete. But real change doesn't happen like that. It's slower, messier, and a lot less cinematic, which is exactly why the show avoids it.
I'm not scared. So you tough?
Yes, I am.
Instead, it leans further into spectacle, louder confrontations, more aggressive inmates, bigger emotional swings. Because if the previous episode didn't feel intense enough, the solution isn't to rethink the method, it's to turn up the volume. And that's how you end up confusing intensity with effectiveness. At the same time, the world around the show started to change. Conversations around mental health, trauma, and youth development became more...
Again, your ass using Reddit posts as your evidence. Again, you can't be trusting anything on Reddit, gang.
Nuanced. People started asking better questions. Like, is screaming at a teenager actually helpful, or is it just dramatic? And once that shift happens, the show doesn't just feel controversial.
Well, let me say this, I was a kid who attended Scared Straight, and I am being 100% honest. When I say I was not a bad kid, and neither were 10 to 15 girls who were with me that day, I can't speak for all the kids that go there. But this group of kids I knew, and we all had messed up home lives and sometimes act it out, but not in violence. I am now a middle-aged woman and still have never had a physical fight in my life. I know one woman is a nurse, most of the women are moms, decent people. One joined the army but died young from heart disease. I don't think being yelled at and threatened with rape by strangers who don't know me did anything besides make me scared that day of them. I'll be interested in what data they've ever collected. Well, they threatened to grape you, right? In jail. That made you scared, right? That made you don't want to go to jail, right? Organic effect 6351. That shit scared you, right? You ain't want to go to jail after that, huh? Says you seem like you live a normal life now. See? Yeah, y'all turned to the nurses, y'all turned to the moms, y'all turned to the decent people, joined the military. Yeah, that shit scared y'all.
Feels outdated. Even the way audiences interact with it changes. Instead of taking it seriously, people start watching it ironically. Clips circulate as memes, reaction videos turn the most intense moments into comedy, and the tone shifts completely.
So that boy put Kool-Aid on his lips.
What was once framed as a life-changing intervention becomes content. And once something becomes content, it's very hard to keep pretending it's also a solution. Because the more you watch it through that lens, the more predictable it becomes. The same structure, the same escalation, the same perfectly timed emotional breakdowns. It stops feeling real and starts feeling constructed.
You like to fight your mama, but you scared of us. What type of real is you, huh?
And once you see that, you can't really unsee it. Which leads to the bigger realization. The problem wasn't just execution, it was the foundation. A system built on fear, packaged as hope, and sold as reality. And eventually, reality pushed back. There's something almost poetic about Beyond Scared Straight. Not in the way the show probably intended, with its dramatic monologues and slow-motion breakthroughs, but in the way it perfectly captured a very specific kind of cultural fantasy.
Now stick your hand in that Kool-Aid. Just stick it in there.
That complex problems can be...
That gotta be the funniest clip. That gotta be the funniest one right there. That was crazy.
...solved quickly, loudly, and within a single episode. Because for a while, it really did feel like it was working. The ratings were huge, the conversations were everywhere, and people genuinely believed this was a bold solution to youth crime. And to be fair, there were moments where it looked convincing. A teenager breaking down, reflecting, promising to change. On camera, it felt like progress. But what the show delivered wasn't change, it was the appearance of change. A clean, emotional arc that gave viewers closure, even if the real story continued long after the episode ended. And that's the part that makes it interesting. Because Beyond Scared Straight understood something very important. If you present something with enough intensity, emotion, and authority, people will feel like it's true, even when it isn't. And maybe that's the real takeaway. Not just that the show didn't work, but that we wanted it to work. We wanted a simple answer, a dramatic fix, a moment where everything clicks and the problem disappears. But that's not how reality works. Reality is slower, messier, and a lot less satisfying, which also makes it a lot harder to turn into television. So in the end, Beyond Scared Straight didn't fail because it lacked effort or intensity.
You hard, man. You hard. You want to do hard? You want to do? Try me. Try me. Yeah, try me.
It failed because it was built on the wrong idea from the beginning. A system built
Them prison niggas be jacked as fuck though, I ain't gonna lie.
On fear, packaged as hope, and sold as reality. And for a while, we believed it. Anyway, like, subscribe, and tell me which reality show should be aggressively yelled at until it changes its behavior next.
Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'm do this. You did a lot of yapping in this video, brother.
The quote-unquote underground is home to